Hello everyone, this is Mr. Brass, and today I'm talking to JP Holding, and yes, this is a little interview, and it's a little bit different than previously, but still I think it's going to be good. Well, without further ado, number one, what got you interested in cartoons and incorporating that into your apologetics?
Well, I've always done cartooning as a hobby ever since high school. Never considered myself on a professional level, but it was something to do and something to get the job done. In terms of incorporating that into apologetics, you may note that initially my earliest video, called The Mythrobuster, was a live presentation with live actors. And that had been my plan from the beginning, but as we produced that video, I realized how much time it would take and how much effort it would take. And so I decided to have a look at the idea of using very basic animation instead. And the first experiment in that was the one I did against Non-Stamp Collector, which involved a game show. And it didn't come out professionally, of course. I wouldn't have expected that. But it came out good enough. An animator friend of mine compared it to Speed Racer back in the 1950s. Just a few frames of simple movement, nothing out of the ordinary, but it gets the job done.
2. Now, you have a pretty interesting view of original sin that you had gotten from your time of studying scholars who have noticed the legal terminology involved. What got you interested in that topic?
Well, tackling original sin was simply an item on the list to do. I was going down a number of relevant doctrines and apologetics issues related to them, and that was simply the doctrine that was next in line at the time that I did that article.
3. My friends, funny enough, didn't know you're a young earth creationist. Now, some fundies on the side of the young earth creationist and old earth creationist debate tend to see it as a salvation issue. Would you say you agree or disagree with that? And if not, is there room for respectful disagreement on certain interpretations of the Bible?
Well, it's certainly true that I've written a number of articles for young earth creation publications, but none of them have been about science issues, about the age of the earth. They've all been about exegetical matters. And all that said, I don't see this as a salvation issue, young earth, old earth. My ministry partner, Nick Peters, believes in an old earth. I do think there are a number of things that you're going to be forced to explain no matter what position you take. But I don't see it as any kind of issue that we need to divide over. And certainly there's room for respectful disagreement on that and other issues.
Number 4. You do tend to focus on the cultural aspect of shame and honor in your work. What got you into that aspect?
Well, I got into the cultural and shame aspect of my studies just as part of my normal course of trying to find resolutions to biblical issues and problems. I ran across a few citations from scholars who specialize in that area. I started to explore their work more in depth after finding what they said interesting, and it grew from there.
Number 5. Now here is the fun stuff, or as I say, fundy stuff. You're sort of well known in the atheist community for being how you can say hands-on with them. You've gone after guys like Cult of Dusty, TMM, Non-Stamp Collector, and many more on your show, while writing about Carrier, Price, and etc. What are your thoughts on the popularity of atheism these days?
Well, going after the big names on YouTube was just a natural extension of what I've been doing earlier on my website, where I just basically went down the roster of major names like Carrier and Price and addressed everyone I could find. Although in the case of those two, part of the reason I addressed them was because they were involved in certain secular web projects early on. As far as going These days, I've noticed that a lot of these guys are less popular than they used to be. They're not making videos anymore. They're not being replaced by any major stars. Just look at Non-Stamp Collector. He's basically done nothing for the past few years. So I've just gone on addressing things from my own website in terms of making videos. I've just been lately coming up with videos based on my past articles.
Number 6. A common objection levied at Christians is the Gospel's census and how it apparently shows the Bible is inaccurate, as no census would require you to go back to a relative so far back and require you to leave. What's your thoughts?
Well, I haven't written a great deal that's original on the census issue because Glenn Miller of the Christian Think Tank did an article on it long before I started my website. But What I believe is that the census was tied to a Jewish festival, so that essentially all the Jews were already on their way to Jerusalem, and they tied that in with the time that they could report in for the census. I also tend to go with the position that it was more likely a census related to property rather than a census of the sort that we know today.
Number 7. What would you recommend to churches in order so they can grab the younger audience?
I really think churches have pretty much lost the battle to grab young audiences. They've made themselves irrelevant in so many ways. The best we can do right now is to continue to use multimedia to attract their attention and to try and make the ideas presentable in a way that they understand and can relate to.
Number 8. Lastly, are there any atheists who you can say have posed interesting challenges to you in your faith?
I wouldn't say any atheists have ever posed any real challenges to me. I've had a few atheists that I've been friendly with, such as a gentleman named Kyle Gherkin some years ago, who I had some very good dialogues with. And we have a few people on the YouTube channel, such as a fellow named Huge Sinker, who come around and ask some very good questions now and then. But I can't really say that any of them have posed any challenges, or they've posed some interesting questions that I've had to do a little research on now and then.
Number 9. Have you in general had to change your mind on some positions you hold?
Oh, sure, I've had to change my mind on a few things, but in every case it's been because I've done my own research. It's not ever been because someone has ever presented to me an opposing case in opposition to something I was arguing for. I do my best to research the positions that I hold, and I'm more than willing to change my mind when I find out something is not true.
And finally, number 10. Now, I've talked to Dr. Michael Heiser 3 times on his books, and I brought up the idea that the sin of Sodom was, instead of sexual degeneracy or inhospitality, was basically disrespecting God's honor, as it was generally a given that gods or their messengers could blend in with the poor and tender people's hospitality. What's your general take on that and the Lot story in general?
Well, I haven't read Michael Heiser's take on the Sodom story, but my view, which was explained in a video that I made, pretty much lines up with that idea. I do believe there was sexual degeneracy involved and that it was a disrespect of honor, but what was happening there was not practicing homosexuality, but an act of dominance over Lot's visitors. And so that certainly fits in the idea with the lack of hospitality.
Well, that is all for today. This is Mr. Brass saying goodbye and give wise.